Welcome to Nordic Talks Japan. I'm Niklas, I'm from Nordic Innovation House Tokyo, and here just to share a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Today's event is a hybrid event. We have members here in the audience at University of Creativity in Tokyo and hundreds of you joining us online. Thank you for your participation. Today's program and speeches will be held in English. If you're following us online and would like to follow the Japanese interpretation, please choose it from the Zoom toolbar that you can find. And you can also use the same toolbar to send us questions during the Q&A. Our program will last for about 90 minutes. We will start with opening remarks from Ambassador of Denmark to Japan. Then we will move on to a guided discussion followed with a Q&A. And last, we will hear closing remarks from Ambassador of Sweden to Japan. We truly hope that you enjoy the program that we have prepared for you today. And without any further ado, I would like to hand it over for opening remarks. Ambassador Taksøe-Jensen.
Thank you, Niklas. Fellow ambassadors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, what a cool place to be. I couldn't have dreamt of a better venue than this, so thank you so much for hosting us here. And on behalf of the Nordic embassies and the Nordic Innovation House, Tokyo, I'm truly honored to open the third Nordic talks here in Tokyo. The aim of these talks is to promote action on the SDGs. We wish to inspire individuals to reflect on how to instigate change. We wish to facilitate dialogue across countries, and we wish to base the conversations on the Nordic values of trust, openness, inclusivity, and innovation. Today's topic is No One Left Behind, Trust and Inclusion in the Digital Age. We have chosen this topic because we believe that focus on trust and inclusion is key to a successful digital transformation. We need a transparent and accountable digitalization to create green and sustainable opportunities for all our citizens, for our public and for our private sector. Digitization has been a priority in the Nordic countries for many years. Now we are widely accepted as digital frontrunners. Our transformation has taught us a lot of lessons we want to share. Our digital infrastructure has made our societies more efficient, made life easier for our citizens, and made us more resilient in times of crisis. Let me just give you one example. When we rolled out the vaccination program in Denmark, everybody received an invitation from the government in our e-boxes. We could then book a time on the public health online portal. You showed up at the doctor, and the day after, in your digital corona certificate, it was reflected. I got my booster shot out here in Japan, and I just had to send it back to the authorities, and now it's reflected in our digital corona certificate. So this just shows you how, when you have the digital framework in place, you really have a good, a resilient way to manage crises like the one we are standing with. Here in Japan, the government has made digitization a key political priority. A new digital agency has been established, and we have a lot of audience here today that represents both public and private sectors. We hope that this talk can inspire to act and share knowledge to meet the future needs of digitization. Thriving on its innovative capacities, we are confident that Japan will succeed in its public digital transformation. Japan has the skills and the resources to do so. And together with the experience from the Nordic countries, Japan can share best practices and lead by example, making sure to include everybody and all the groups of society in a digital transformation and making sure that no one is left behind. This leads me to introducing the real experts in this field. I'm happy to introduce today's moderator in our panel, Yoko. We are on first name now, Ishikura, Chief Officer of the Digital Agency, a Professor Emeritus at the Hitotsubashi University, has generally agreed to moderate this discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have Taro, a longtime friend of Denmark and the Nordic countries, Member of Parliament for the LDP and Chief of Communications. We have Mr. Henrik Johansson, Executive Vice President of Growth at Crypto.com, I have to say, and former managing director of Spotify out here in Japan. And finally, my old friend Rikke Zeberg, branch director for digitalization at the Confederation of Danish Industries and former head of the Danish Digitalization Agency. Thank all of you for participating today. I really look forward to an insightful talk. I would also like to thank those of you who have joined us here in person at this cool place and those who have joined us online. Finally, thank you so much to the University of Creativity for partnering with us. We have received great collaboration and assistance in facilitating this Nordic talk. I can promise you this is not the last time we come here. Thank you so much for having us today. And with those words, I give the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to moderate this session. And I thought I was going to introduce everybody, but since Peter did all of that, so I don't have to do anything. And we just talk a little bit about how we proceed. After the introduction, we have a discussion. We have a panel of three panelists here, and also 3 panelists, including Rikke over there. And then we'll have a discussion. And we want to keep everything very casual and interactive rather than somebody comes with a presentation and slides and all that stuff. So that's what I would like to keep. And that's why I would like to keep everybody's name first name basis, because I can't really pronounce some of the last names. So I thought it would be much easier for me to go with the first name. So my name is Yoko Ishikura. I'm a digital chief officer of digital agency, but I'm a professor emeritus of Hitotsubashi University. I used to be executive director of several companies. And Nordic countries are very close to my heart. And I used to do something for the World Economic Forum. And Nordic countries are always sort of like featured because they are not huge in many ways, but they are very innovative, and they do a lot of things. And I had a chance to visit Helsinki, and I have some people over from the other different embassies, including Sweden. I think I did something for the Swedish business, and it's always a lot of pleasure for me to do that. And this is the first time that I've ever been here, and I'm very impressed. I think this is great, and with the music and video and all sorts of things. So I thought it's very, very nice. And I'm not quite sure what this is for and how long it's been in existence, but I think this is such a great venue for all of us. And I would really like to thank the University of Creativity people, as well as the embassy people and so forth, to give us an opportunity to use this place, at the same time to give us the opportunity to discuss innovation and so forth. Today's topic is nobody left behind, and trust and inclusion in digital age. And we often talk about inclusion. Particularly in Japan, I used to do a lot of things, and diversity and inclusion kind of things. Japan is not really known for being diverse, but diversity is just a piece of it. So unless you include everybody, that's half of the game. But today, because of this digital transformation in digital media, which enables us to do a lot of things, trust becomes such an important concept. And because how do you trust if you don't see the people, if you can't touch this person? And I think particularly so in Japan, because a lot of people love face-to-face contacts. And however, I think that's been challenged, and in a very constructive way, because we were not able to have face-to-face contacts. So what do? You don't connect with people. But I think that really has accelerated a lot of things related to digital transformation. We're still very early stage, and I'm pretty sure that we can learn a lot of things from Nordic countries. And so that's the kind of thing that I'm hoping. And at the same time, we have some people from the school, as well as quite a few people watching online. And I would like everybody to ask any questions, and we'll try to respond to some of the questions. And always the being asked and being challenged is the best way to make us think a little bit more. So I really would like to appreciate if you ask a lot of questions. And so that's with that note. Let me just proceed to the three panelists. And I would like to ask them to share with us what are the key things that you would really like to tell us about your country, about the digital transformation in your country. What are the kind of things that you would like us to do? And so these are the sort of general questions, but you don't need to stick to that. As I said, I want to keep everything casual and interactive discussion brings a lot of things because we don't follow the rules. So let me start off with Rikke. Tell us a little bit about what are the key features of Denmark, digital transformation in Denmark.
Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for inviting me to this event. It's very exciting. Trust and inclusion is something I've been working with a lot in Denmark, and it's very close to my heart. I've been the Director General of the Danish Agency of Digitalization for 4 years, and I've been working there for 8 years. So I've been part of the journey for the digital transformation in Denmark. Also, I've been in public sector for 20 years. And what we've done in Denmark is the past 25 years, we worked actually on our digital journey. And one of the key words here is cooperation. We have done it in cooperation in public sector, not only at the state level, but we've been doing it in cooperation with municipality, regions, and state level, and also the private sector. So what we did back 22 years ago was that there was a task force formed where there was participants from all these municipalities, regions, state level, and we started to make jointly strategies for Denmark, how to move forward in the digitization. And what we actually did manage was to build slowly an infrastructure in Denmark, where you also hear our ambassador telling that this infrastructure is what we're using today for all the public sector and also private sector digitization. And the infrastructure consists of some key elements, and we are keeping on building on that. And the key element is that all the Danes have an EID. We are more than a little bit more than 6 million people now, and there's 5.2 million Danes who actually have the EID. And also it's mandatory in Denmark since now 10 years to actually have a digital mailbox. You receive it automatically. And this digital mailbox, you receive all the letters from all authorities and also from the private sector companies who wants to use it. So you actually get your mail in your digital mailbox and you access the digital mailbox with your EID. Also, a part of our digital infrastructure is that we have a citizen portal and we have a business portal, but the citizen portal called the citizen.dk, there's actually you access to all public sector in Denmark. You can find all forms, all things you want to do and interact with the public sector, where you beforehand had to go to the different authorities. Now you can go with the citizen portal and do your business. You use your EID to identify yourself, and then you can do everything you want to do. You can, if you need social welfare, you can apply for it there. You can, if you have your child want to go to kindergarten or school, you can put it on waiting list there. You can change your address. You can see your doctor results. As the ambassador tell you, that's also where you have access for your COVID-19 test answers. So this infrastructure is basically used by all Danes now. And there's one important thing when you're talking about inclusion and trust. When the laws were made that this was mandatory for the citizens, there was an exception. So you had an opportunity, if you not had a computer at home or you were not able to use a computer, you could still have a paper trail. And actually we had a goal that 80% of the Danes should use this digital solutions. And today it's 92% of the Danes who actually use it and have a high satisfaction. And the Danes have an expectation that the public sector serves these digital services, because in the private sector, if you want to go to travel or if you want to go banking, your insurance company, all the private sector has the digital solution. So they have an expectation in Denmark that the public sector also is handling this service to you.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's very interesting, cooperation and the key infrastructure. One of the things which I thought is extremely interesting is mandatory. How do you make it mandatory? And I think it's partly because we are having some difficulty making it mandatory in here. So if you make it mandatory, a lot of people just with the big sort of loud voice kind of make a big deal out of it. And so we try to make it parallel. And particularly, it depends upon the generation as well, but if you're not that familiar with all those digital things looks like so scary. So you don't want to do it very quickly. So if you have a choice of either going non-digital or digital, you would stay with the non-digital. So that's the kind of thing that I think we always sort of have had trouble. And I was wondering how you made it. And that was the part that I was very, very interested. But unless you make it mandatory by default, kind of, it's very difficult to move forward. So in that sense, I thought it was very interesting. As a matter of fact, Rikke also talked about the cooperation between public and private sector, which is, I think, is the key in many ways. And with that note, I would like to go to Henrik, because you have done many things in both areas. And you can talk a little bit about this cooperation. What are the difficulties? What are the key features of the cooperation, collaboration you have done?
Sure. It's a great question. I think fundamentally there are a few things that you need to kind of take into account when you consider digitalization of these types of services. Rikke talked about how citizens and constituents can interact with these services, how they reach them and so on. There is the inner digitalization of services that happens on the inside of government, of course, where databases are created, data is shared and so on. A form of digitalization that actually anyone who partakes in or is part of a society actually is included in, but they might not interact with it directly. And then there is the third side of this digitalization, which is the interfaces, the devices and so on, and the knowledge required to actually access these types of services. I think before going to the question about collaboration with the private sector, I think one thing that Sweden did, which was really, really impactful and quite interesting, was that we had a lot of programs in place in the early 90s, mid-90s, that including tax subsidiaries and so on, that allowed people, regardless of income level and so on, to actually acquire a PC of relatively good specification, put it in their homes and access the internet, which led to a very sort of early adoption of those types of technologies, the interfaces, the devices that we actually use to access the internet and so on. We haven't, Sweden, I should say, haven't taken the fully mandatory route, though participation still remains very, very high. In fact, the most commonly used digital ID system is run by a private company, which is with participation from banks and so on. So it's set up a little bit differently. But I think one thing that is absolutely essential here is that you consider very carefully, from the point of the user, what is the actual value that these services will provide to me? Why should I be participating in this? And what does it give to me that is better than what I have today? And I think if you cannot articulate that well enough, then it's very difficult to convince people to partake and come with you on this journey. Unless, of course, you make it mandatory. That's a different route.
You force them.
And that could work too. Obviously, I mean, there are examples of that being implemented quite successfully. But I think one key to that value question is to get the input from the private sector, so that whatever systems you put in place, whether it's a digital identification system or whatever, that becomes useful beyond just the government services that you provide. Because I think in a lot of cases, most of us, we don't interact with governmental services or agencies that often on a day-to-day basis. And if that's something you do maybe twice or 3 times per year, you might not see the need for carrying around such an identity. Maybe the risks or what you perceive as the risks of giving up your identity or turning it digital looks greater than the reward in terms of the value that this would bring to you. Probably there are some interesting questions around things like the My Number system in Japan and how that's being implemented, which I think tangentially sort of touches upon this as well.
Very good. And I think it's very much related to what's going on in here, and my number card. And I try to get the idea from my friends, sort of users, whether they're interested in getting the my number card or not. And they said no. And I said, why? Because there isn't any value to it. I still have to go to the office. So why do I do this kind of thing? So I think it's very true. And I mean, that's very true with the business, unless you can sell it. And this is good for you, rather than good for me, as a seller. It's very difficult to convince the users. So how do I do that? And I think in a way, it's what's required is that whether you can put yourself into the user's shoes or not, and see it from that point of view. And so that's I thought it was very interesting in many ways. And let me go to Kono-san. Since Ambassador talked a little bit about vaccine and so forth. And as a matter of fact, I got a booster yesterday. So,
good for you.
And it took a little while. They have this large-scale venue in Otemachi, and that's where I went in the first 2, and also this time as well. And it goes away in like 9 minutes. Or 15 minutes or something like that. So you just kind of have to wait until this 6 o'clock thing and just go there. And but it was very, very different from what he described. And you were in charge of that kind of things. So tell us a little bit about how you see these things that we have heard.
Okay, thank you. Well, I became the minister in charge of the vaccine rollout last January 2021. The first thing I noticed was there's no digital system to record who get the vaccinated. The health ministry said, yes, we have a paper. And I said, we're going to vaccinate 100 million people twice. And if we are trying to keep track of who has been vaccinated with papers, and then I asked them, okay, how am I going to know how many vaccinations done on certain date? We count papers. Forget it. And we developed a new system in 2 months, and it's still in use, and it's working quite well. But what I was surprised next is we developed the system, and we are delivering that to the medical doctors. So if you shoot the vaccine, please put it in the system. You just have to go through, you just have to read the papers with the machine. And they said they don't want to do it. Is there any way they can do with facsimile? And I said, wait a minute, we can't do this. And the doctors told me they have to deal with so many systems already. VSIS, HERSIS, GMIS, whatever. And every system requires different ID and password. So they were asking me, how many more IDs and passwords do I have to remember, or can I just write it down on the wall to make things easier? So we changed our system so that they can use one of the system ID and password. And they unwillingly agree to use it, but now we are in use. Now we get Omicron here in Japan, and we got tens of thousands new patients every day. What's going on in whole of Japan is if a medical clinic find the patient with, tested positive for COVID-19, he has to, or she, the doctor has to fill in the paper with handwriting, and then they have to fax to report. And, those who get the report have to use a calculator to tally how many new COVID-19 patients today. It's crazy. We are hiring probably thousands of people just sending fax, receiving fax, doing the calculator. So Japan's losing population. I mean, we're losing 50 million a year. No, not 50 million, 500,000 a year, right? And we are aging, society is aging. They're going to be more frail senior people. And we need to stand by with them. We have to take care of them. But if the population is going down, but the people over 65's number is increasing, if we continue business as usual, we're not going to be able to take care of them. So we need to use a digital technology or AI so that a human being will do what human beings have to do. Anything else can be done by robot or AI so that we can focus on the people. And that's what I've been telling people. Okay, we are going through the digital transformation. A lot of Japanese, when they hear digital transformation, what comes to their mind is the movie by Charlie Chaplin, The Modern Times, when Chaplin goes through, the machine. So we're not trying to create a society like that. We are trying to create a society where you can actually, sit next to your grandmother and take care of them, talk to them. So in order to do that, I think we just have to use the technology so the less number of people could take care of the same number of people. So that's what we are trying to do. And they're going to be a big, big hurdle, and it's going to be a long way.
I see.
Unfortunately.
I think you sort of touched upon the generational gap. Those who remember this Chaplin tend to be older, I suppose. I don't think the teenagers will recall what's going on. So in that sense, we sort of focus on the older generation. And each generation has their own reference, from their own experiences. So in that sense, I think it's quite a challenge, if you try to. But I wonder if the young people, if they hear digital transformation, they don't think about this Chaplin thing. What do they think of? What's their image?
Well, the younger people, when they were born, they had an iPhone on their hand, and they, So I think younger people have no problem dealing with digital technology. When we had a poll, we asked people, okay, from which media you get political news. Every generation, number one is still television. I was surprised. But people younger than 50, the second choice or second source of the information is internet. And those who are over 50, a newspaper. So the younger generation don't read a newspaper. And senior people are reading newspaper from the paper. So I think when they talk about digital transformation to the younger people, I mean, they're already transformed, so they don't need a transformation. That's what I think.
Henrik?
Actually, I think that's a very interesting point, because when we say that they have already transformed, I think one problem that needs to be kept in mind or addressed is that we talk about inclusion and we talk about including the older generations, for example, on a journey to transform digitally. But at the same time, every day that goes by when we are not transforming digitally, we're actually locking out younger generations who expect things to work in a certain way, or who might not have access to a fax machine, for example, because they were born with an iPhone in their hand and so on. So there's a duality of inclusion here, which is really interesting, where if we fail to perform this kind of transformation, we are essentially making it harder for the younger generations to participate in many of these systems and services, which I think is a perspective we maybe don't discuss as much.
I see. Rikke, do you have any comments on that? I mean, how do you deal with the Denmark, as I understand, as one of the countries with the largest ratio of older generation?
Yeah.
And yet,
So, but actually, the elderly people in Denmark has taken the technology in use in a broad way. What we did when it was made mandatory to use the digital mailbox and the EID, again, cooperation is an important word here. We actually, or the public sector actually made cooperation with the Confederation of the Elderly People in Denmark. It's a very large confederation, was very active. And they actually made courses for all elderly people out in all municipalities, very locally, to learn how to use your EID, to learn how to use your iPad. And it was a huge success that we actually got the civil society involved in the whole transformation and engaged in that. And what we discovered was that the elderly people, they actually love to learn. They actually love to learn to use their iPad to have their conversations with their grandchildren. And what we see now is that a lot of the elderly people actually like the systems. And then it was also important that all the municipalities, they had a service center where you could show up physically, and then you could talk to a person, and then you could also get information or help if you have some difficulties. And of course, now when I'm talking about it, it sounds like everything is very easy. It's not easy. Of course, we had a lot of obstacles and also a lot of challenges. And we also have elderly people who has a hard time keeping up with the speed and the hasten of society at all. But we have to remember that in the paper trail world, there's also elderly people or people who not have the best skills, who having a hard time keeping up with the forms, understand the dialogue with the public sector. And that's not something that's created in the digital world. That's a problem we had dealt with for many years. But actually, the digital solutions also give opportunities to communicate in other forms. You can make small videos, or you can make small interactive things on the internet who actually make it easier to understand also for disabled people, like when you have a hearing problem or if you're blind, or there's also solutions digitally which actually make it easier for the group who's normally is having a hard time dealing with the public sector. And also another thing we discovered was that, you know, the homeless people was also something that we were thinking, how can we deal with that? But actually, the homeless people, almost all of them have an iPhone. So it was easier for them suddenly to keep track on or keep in contact with the public sector when they had their iPhone. So of course, there's some of the homeless people who have bigger problems and not able to, but a lot of the homeless people actually also could use that. And what we also did in this name of the corporation was that we also had a forum where all the confederations for disabled people or people with other sort of challenges, we have a lot of them in Denmark. We invited them in all the time and have a dialogue and say, what problems do you have? And then try to solve it in a dialogue with them. So I think the cooperation between all levels of government and with private sector, and also the confederation, the civil society, is very important in this transformation. You can't do it by state on your own. You need to get everybody involved.
Yeah, I see. And it's not that easy. I mean, it's easy to talk about it. The cooperation is needed for this. But when you put these people into one room and let them discuss, I mean, all of a sudden they realize we have been in a different world. So we don't have any language to communicate with each other. But anyway, it was very interesting. I think one of the things that, getting back to this elderly, one of the things that I hear very often, and particularly during the COVID, is that they can't see their grandkids. So that really made it an incentive for them to use iPad or something, because that way they can communicate with them and they can watch. And that's a great incentive. And in a way, that's a value that Henrik was talking about. And so if you can figure out, okay, what exactly does this person get from using this? And so I thought it was quite interesting. And one of the things is that we used to talk about reverse mentoring. We don't anymore. Reverse mentoring was something that mentoring is usually older generation, senior people sort of mentor younger people and try to guide them. But reverse mentoring was something that, the young kids know much more about the new skills. So let them do the mentoring for the older or senior people. But I don't hear that anymore. And it seems like it's much more like a collective sort of schools and classes, probably sponsored by the government or the private sector for the older people. So I don't know what's going on there, but anyway, so that is what I felt. Kono-san, let me ask you this. I think Henrik and also the Rikke talked about we need to have a clear value of whatever we do, we offer from digital. And I think you talked about the same kind of things. What is the difficulty that we cannot really sell this value, quote unquote?
Well, I think it needs to be easy to use to begin with.
Right.
Now, my number, I think this is a good system, but in order to use my number card or my number system on your iPhone, it's quite difficult to log in. You have to remember password and things. So when I went to Singapore, all they have to do is get out their smartphone and they got the face recognition. So they just go into the government system right away. I had to ask him, how did you do it? And well, it's a face recognition. So it's like 2 seconds to get in the system. Yeah. And it's quite easy to use. And they can do anything on one system. Here in Japan, quite a few systems exist even for the central government. And if you wanted to do something with your local government, you may have to log in a different system. So we need to present one form of government system, and maybe if any private company wanted to use it, we need to let them join the system so that, take out the smartphone, face recognition, and you can renew your driver's license, or you can order something from Amazon. You can transfer the money through your bank, one system right away. Then it's so easy, and you wanted to use it. And what's stopping is, I think, regulation. So that's why it's important for Japan to proceed with deregulation. There are so many regulation, I would say unnecessary regulation. And then each municipality, more than 1,700 municipalities have a different system. And we have to unite it and just ask them to use one system. So whatever you are, you can do anything in one face recognition. I think that would increase value, and then more people are willing to use it to start with.
So that's easier said than done. to me, because we are dealing with so many different systems. So we have to figure out where to start and how to make sure that we communicate this value of one system to the majority of people. But that sort of leads me to another question of how do we secure ID? We talked about face recognition. Mm-hmm. Face recognition is great, but who believes? I mean, this is related to this trust issue, the other part of this topic. And unless we are very clear that our ID is secured, whether that's a face recognition or not. And I think face recognition got much, much better. But I remember that quite a while ago on the Facebook page, whenever I posted something, I got somebody else's name on it, on mine. And I said, what is this? So, I mean, face recognition was not exactly the greatest, accuracy, and they still had quite a bit of difficulty. So, I mean, particularly when we're talking about if we try to make one system working for everything, the ID is quite important. So make sure that we have to secure it. And in addition, we have to make sure that the fact that it is secure needs to be communicated so that they will try. And that's sort of related to the protection of personal data as well. I think one of the reasons why we have so much difficulty making this medical and healthcare data system in Japan is people are so afraid that once you register your data, your personal data related to healthcare may go out, maybe. So, I mean, how do we make sure that we protect our personal data? Can we protect our personal data? And so that's something. Anybody? Henry?
Sure. I think that there are many ways of answering that question, actually. You can answer it from the perspective of technology, right? Are there technologies in the world today that are secure enough for anyone to trust with their personal identity or data and so on? Yes, the answer is yes. There are technologies that can do this. Blockchain technology is a wonderful example of that. It's a little bit complex, but it's a fantastic system for creating trust, right? But there's also the other aspect of it, which is perhaps also very important to get to before we start talking about specific technologies, which is like, where does this trust actually live? When you say that you trust, what does it mean? Who are you trusting with this? And then what are the levels of trust that needs to be built into this system for it to function, right? Because I think a lot of us are very happy with giving up a lot of personal information to some of the social networks that we interact with on a daily basis, in part because we're not that afraid of that data leaking somewhere. Maybe someone will get access to a particular account. That could be a bit embarrassing, but it's probably not the end of the world. Whereas your medical records are a whole different story, right? A very different level of trust is required there. So I think what we need to do here is both look at who establishes what trust really means. Is it a single entity? Are we creating an intermediary who we say, this agency, this person, this company, this corporation vouches for this information and we trust them to keep it safe? Are we building something that is completely distributed, which in the world of blockchain would be the case, right? Where you don't actually need an intermediary, you don't have a third party that you entrust with, but instead it's distributed. And in either of these cases, what is this data going to be used for? And how am I going to, again, sort of extract value out of it? So what are the levels of trust that I need to understand in order to let others access this information then? I think one major problem that needs to be discussed a lot more is this personal information that we talk about a lot. Like, what is it actually? Is it my entire medical history, who I am? Is it what I like and dislike? Is it my banking history? What is this personal information? And what is the very core of it that is so personal and sensitive that I want to make sure that no one except the people or the governments or the agencies or the agents that I allow access to can actually access this information? I think when you look at it from the perspective of e-government, for example, and so on, this unit that we refer to as one citizen or one person, what is it actually from the perspective of the agencies and the services that we interact with? It's slightly more academic questions, but I think they are very important to discuss, because if you ask someone to trust a particular system or a particular technology, you first have to ask the question, what does that trust actually mean?
Yeah.
Because it's a term we use a lot, but it has many, many different definitions.
Right. Very true. What do we mean if we trust? I mean, even though we were talking about the people-to-people communication, what do we mean by, we trust this person? And it's not very clear. And I'm not really sure whether we can ever define it. I mean, for the data and things, there are certain things that we can define. But trust is such a soft, sort of vague, very subjective in many ways. And I think it depends upon the situation, what we mean by trust. So, I mean, we talk about trust, but what exactly does it mean? Unless we solve that definition problem, or at least we are a little more clear about what we mean by that, it may be very difficult to go forward. And so we say trust and inclusion, but I mean, what do we mean?
Yeah, I think again, like coming back to this idea of value, maybe I'm coming back to it a lot, but I think actually from the perspective of a user of any of these systems, whether it's a citizen or a user of a particular system or service, the amount of trust required to get someone to participate is going to always be an effect of the amount of value that they see in participating in this service, right? If there is an enormous amount of value in me giving you this information, then obviously I want to make sure that you're really taking it seriously, that I can truly trust you to keep this safe, or that it's very clear and transparent to me what you're going to use it for, and so on. If that is not the case, if it's not considered as sensitive, then probably the levels of trust are much lower. I don't think that when you look at it from the perspective of various government agencies or services for that matter, that they all sort of perhaps warrant the same level of trust. And maybe that's one way of thinking about how to start that journey, right? Where do you go? Where do you start to build that trust? Because as with whether it's a system to system or person to person, I don't expect anyone to trust me immediately when we first meet. It takes a bit of time to build that trust together, right? And I think that's a journey, right? That has to start somewhere. I wouldn't give you my bank details immediately, but maybe someday I would if we know each other well. Maybe not, I don't know. But the point is that it takes a while for you and me to build that level of trust, and it takes a while for me to build trust in systems and technology and agencies and whoever I choose to share this data with. So it's probably a journey that needs to start somewhere where the barrier of entry is a little bit lower.
I see. I think that leads me to another question of whether we make the digital transformation or digital use of public service and so forth mandatory or not. Should it come from the top down, or should it come from the bottom up? I think that's the issue that's being discussed very often. Particularly, I mean, when we're talking about trust, is it possible for somebody on the top to sort of force, okay, this is the trust that we are talking about, so you do it? It's rather difficult to think.
Yeah, I think in general, from a technical point of view, what we have learned in the past 25, 30 years is any monolithic structure that claims to be trustworthy eventually runs into issues at some point, which is why the idea of distributed trust is so interesting.
Right. I see. So as long as it's distributed, I mean, I think that goes against the centralized system no matter what, almost.
I think when you talk about the trust, I think there's, I don't know, a lot of people think if it's okay to do something with this ID and password. If ID and password get stolen, everything that I put it in going to be spread out, and that's one kind of trust. My wife never used like Amazon or Rakuten. She always come to me, buy me this on Amazon, buy me that on Amazon. So I have to do that.
I see.
It's okay. Yeah. It's okay for me to, hacked, but not her. And then the second trust is if we put the medical record or bank, transfer or whatever, someone who's authorized to use this information, are they going to misuse that, or they're going to do what they're supposed to be doing? So it's okay to do the tax return as long as the tax office use it for proper purpose. But if they misuse it for other things, or the police agency misuse my record for something else, that's different kind of thing.
Right.
So when you wanted to create mandatory system, there's always people who don't trust the government, and then they don't want to be in the system.
Right.
So they would opt out. I guess so. From the top, you should do this. It should be almost mandatory. But if you really, really don't trust the authority, I think only way is you opt out. So I think that we always have to give choices. But hopefully, 97% of people you should use the system. It'll be more convenient, more cost effective, will give more value. But there must be some other choices, I guess.
I think that's very much related to my sort of question, which I have had for some time. My understanding was that Japan people do trust government, and particularly if we compare that with the Nordic countries. Nordic countries, I think the people trust the government. That's what I hear, and I think that's very true. And I think we used to say that Japan people trust the government. I'm not really sure whether that still is true or not. Because, I mean, in other countries like US or Canada or whatever, it's obvious that people don't trust government. So there's no discussion. But in Japan, I thought we had some kind of trust in the government. And it's not very clear whether we still do or not.
Well,
what do you think?
I mean, if you get on the street in Tokyo, 99% of people are still wearing masks, right? It's not that we trust the government. We don't think it's a freedom issue. We are just trying to protect ourselves from Omicron. So that's why we wear masks. But if you go to Canada or United States or maybe some European country, to wear a mask is freedom issue. So I think it's not just simply the Japanese are more trusting government. I think the definition of freedom is a bit different from other countries. And maybe some people outside of Japan would think Japan is a society of conformity. But I think the issue of freedom is a little different. That's my take.
Yeah. Rikke, do you have anything on that?
I was just sitting thinking that trust is very, very hard to build, but it's very easy to lose again. And I think it's correct that the Scandinavian countries and Denmark, the citizens have a very high degree of trust to begin with. And then when you have these systems, you can't afford to have a lot of failures, because then people are starting to mistrust them. Our EID, we had it for more than 10 years. There's been 6 billion transactions with the EID, and very, very few accidents or incidents where it got stolen, but it has happened. And actually there's just been some cases in Denmark now where some thieves have been very creative and standing by the physical mailbox, because you get a little card with numbers on in Denmark to use for your EID, then been standing waiting for the mailman to show up with this card, and then stole it. And that has started a discussion on the trustworthiness of the EID. But the fact is that it's been used 6 billion times, and all the Danes use it. This particular thing for every day for the banks, for insurance, all public sector, for health authorities, and so on, and they have a long history now of using the EID, and it's a big foundation for the trust. But when the stories start to come out now with some tech companies who have misused data from the public sector, and we can actually see that it has an impact on the trust also in government from the Danes. So I really mean it's very easy to lose the trust again, and you have to be very careful with your data to maintain the trust that we luckily had from the beginning in Denmark. And I also say we have some, for the EID, we also have EU standards for both security and for the levels of security it should live up to. And that also helps to make sure that your systems are probably safe. But trust is something you should really care about, not to lose again.
I see. I think that's very true, even for the private sector. You know, if the corporations, they have to do a lot of things to build the reputation. But once it's gone, it's gone. I mean, it can go very quickly. So that's something that you really need to think about. And I thought I would like to come back to Kono-san's point of freedom, because sometimes I wonder why there's this huge protest, you know, against masks and things in other countries, and it's such a big issue. Whereas here, so what? I mean, that's how I feel. And so freedom, I'm not really sure where it started, but it's such, I mean, it's how you position these things, these actions, mask wearing and mandatory and things. But it's always, it's almost, I'm just kind of lost why they have to argue back and forth on freedom issue. It's not such a big deal, but to a lot of people, it's such a big deal, right? So it's very interesting in many ways, and I think that shows how divided we are in terms of how we think about certain things in the society. And my question now is that, is digital able to cross or connect these divided places? I think devices have been produced because of digital to some extent. But can we use digital as a means, as a media, to go back or to connect back and to combine these divided world? And because to me, the digital, one of the benefits of digital is that you can go across, you know, geography, national boundaries, and so forth. So that's a great way to connect people, regardless of where they are. And yet, I think in one way, we have made the world much more divided, partly because of the digital, and partly because this information and echo chamber things. And I'm not sure whether we could use digital media to reverse or to go in a different way to make it happen.
I think digital media is now connecting anti-mask people across the countries. So the American anti-mask people can connect it to UK or Denmark or Sweden anti-mask people. You know, it's quite difficult to connect pro-mask and anti-mask in the same country.
Right.
But I think it's because of the AI technology involved in the digital technology, so that if you are anti-mask, if you post something on your Facebook, and Facebook would recommend more anti-mask feed, so you keep on reading that, and your connection with those people gets stronger. So the digital technology is connecting, but to whom? I think not physically, but more ideologically.
I see. So that's a new perspective on the value, or I guess the value of digital, even though that may not be what we wanted. And we have to be very careful how to deal with that kind of things. Since we have about 20 minutes or so left, I would like to open up to the questions, and I believe that there are some students here. And we also have received some of the questions, I think most of which I meant to respond. But here, let me ask some of the other students whether you have any questions or any comments, because we talked a little bit about the generational gap and things. Yeah. I think this is what we tend to receive many questions, comments related to the generational gap, and as we talked about, the elderly are not that interested or are not that willing to learn something new, and particularly digital it sounds a little bit scary, and we talked a little bit about this reverse mentoring and things. So how do you deal with the elderly? That's a sort of stupid question, but そうか。はい。
I don't know how exactly thing is going on for elderly people, but especially someone said in the discussion, I guess, but the mind of learning a new things from a new generation is kind of, I think, important, because always my grandmother is saying when I was asked to ask her to use Instagram and create a Instagram account, and she said no, this is really difficult, and it's really scary to compromising my information or something. So but of course those scary things of compromising the information is there, of course, but if you scare something, and if you wait on the moment that any of fear goes away, it's gonna be really, really late. So I think I'm not gonna saying don't scare, just create new account of Instagram. Try to use for a week or something, and try to connect people, and experience the those excitement of connecting people, just for a week or for a month or something, just beginning, and you can just decide what to do for the next. Try to go on and just how to say create how to say shoku in English.
Delete?
Delete the account or something. Yeah, that is my thoughts.
Okay. I think that what you're saying is that rather than being scared and do nothing, give it a try and see what happens. And if you don't like it, that's okay. But unless you try it, you'll never find out. And I often receive the not exactly the same question, but the similar kind of questions when I'm dealing with the business people and so forth. And it's that you can always try something new. And people say, but new things are so scary. So how do you deal with this sort of fear. And I said, I think it's very natural that you are scared and you are not sure whether this is going to work or not. But unless you try it, you'll never find out. And just give it don't go all the way. Then, if you try to open up your whole account to the world, I think you're going to be in big trouble. But if you can try, as you mentioned, if you can try Instagram or something for like a certain period of time and see whether you like it or not, and that opens up a very new possibility. When I started the blog entry, I asked around and found out what's the biggest scare if you start the blog, and I had no idea. And they said, as long as you write something this is quite a while ago, like 2007 or something like that. If you write a lot of things about political, your blog may burn. And also, if you criticize certain people in a very harsh way, that is a sure way of losing your followers. And those things were very, very helpful because I had no idea what to do. So, and I still make quite a bit of mistakes here and there, but I think just give it a try is a good idea. Anybody else? One student? Go ahead.
はい、ありがとうございます。この日本でどのようにこのデジタル社会を作っていくのかっていう時に重要な観点が、その良さをどうやって伝導していくかっていうところだと思うんですね。で、例えばマイナンバーカードっていうのは、僕はものすごい持ってるんですけど、持ってない高齢者の方も多くいて、でそういう方は例えば、オールドメディアを見て、マイナンバーカードは政府からなんか情報を抜き取られるから心配だみたいな、いうことを言ってるます。なので重要なのは、なんかそのメディアに対してマイナンバーカードが広がった時に、そのメディアにもインセンティブがあるような形をどう設計するかだというふうに思ったんですが、例えばその日本がアナログ放送からデジタル放送に移行するときに日本義務化をして、今はデジタル放送しか見れない、それはメディアにもそうするインセンティブがあったから、メディアはそういう協力したと思うので、デジタル社会もなんかマイナンバーカードが義務化することによって、メディアもなんかインセンティブがあるような形になれば、その良さはもっと社会に伝わっていくんじゃないかなというふうに思いました。
I think what you're saying is that, let me just translate the main part. Media plays a significant role in persuading or this sort of not persuading the people, taking an example of my number card. So if the media sort of complains or say, this is the way that the government is trying to steal your data, then nobody would like to do that. So, but if you can make sure that the media, there is an incentive for media to take some actions, that will change the whole thing. And I think I've sort of noticed lately, we used to have a lot of media which criticize all those digital attempt of by the digital agency or other places. And I thought they didn't quite understand we are in version 1. And this is still beta. But they sort of assume because this is the government stuff, everything has to be perfect, which is not true. I mean, digital, it never, you really try to make it, make it better every time by providing, by offering it. Henrik?
Yeah, I think just two comments on that. Yeah. One is I think, and I don't think that is what you're saying, but it is of course very important to have an objective media that tells the full story of when things are not working so well as well. That story needs to be told. But I think at the same time, one of the reasons it's sometimes difficult for people to understand these processes and what's going on is that very little is shared before something is released or actually sort of hits the public, right? The idea that we are going to change something, we are going to digitalize something, and this is the reasons why we're doing it, this is how it's going to work, this is the benefit to you as a citizen and so on. Those types of stories are rarely told before something is actually released to the public. And that's the first time you get a huge number of people starting to interact with this system. If this was a private company developing a piece of software, there would have been probably a lot of steps before that. That I don't think necessarily that our sort of government agency friends are as necessarily as good at sort of managing things like you say. This is a beta, but what does a beta mean? Is it actually treated as such? Is it released to a small group of people? Is it tested properly? Is that data gathered? Is it being analyzed? Does that lead to a version up and so on? Like these types of questions that are very common in regular software development is probably not treated in the same way when you develop a public facing system for an agency, for example. So I think that's the sort of getting that story out early and making sure that people know we're going to introduce this system, this is how it's going to work, and not necessarily do it in an infomercial that is, not particularly fun maybe, but try to make it exciting, right? Try to make people understand why does this matter to you, and this is all the good stuff that's going to come out of this. And of course, make sure, like we said earlier, make sure that you have the private sector on board with that, right? So that there is value that hits users as often and as early as possible, and not just, the 2 or 3 times a year when they go and make their taxes, or they need to get, a record of where they live. Those types of actions also are not necessarily delightful in nature, right? It's going and doing your taxes. I'm sure there's some people who think that that's a lot of fun and that's a lot of delight in that process, but most people probably don't, right? And so if that's your only interaction with the system, it's not going to feel like it's something you really want to sort of participate in. It's exciting to you. So what are the other values, right? What are the reasons to use this outside of, when you can use your identity, your digital identity, for example, to log into Amazon, to do all these different things, that it becomes a very different story. So I think that's making sure that this process of developing these services, who they are for, what is the value they bring, how is it going to happen, that story needs to be told early on.
I see. I think that's related to what you mentioned. I think you mentioned from the analog to digital broadcasting system. I think it took quite a while. And the media, there was an incentive for media as well, as you mentioned, but at the same time, they took time to explain this is good and it's going to be better for you, kind of thing, the consumers. So I think that's very much related to what you have mentioned.
The story of digital broadcasting is easy, right? Because the picture quality is better.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't want that?
Yeah. If something is very obvious, it's much easier to convince. But if it's one of those things that comes later, that's a little bit different story. Anybody else? Go ahead.
はい、ありがとうございます。日本国民はその、コロナ禍で給付金の必要性を訴える一方で、そのマイナンバーカードの取得には、消極的な姿勢であると思います。今このマイナンバーカードの取得でマイナポイントの第2弾も始まりましたが、このある種の釣りみたいな形で日本国民のそのマイナンバーカードの取得を煽ってますけど、もうちょっとその利便性を訴えるというか、今保険証もマイナンバーカードとして使えるようになりましたけど、そこの規制改革をするためには、その政策的な話になっちゃいますけど、どういう政治力が必要だと思いますか？
His question was that if we can make my number card much more of value to the people, such as driver's license, such as healthcare, and other things, I think that may be much clearer to get to get them on board. And they talked about, and I did get the benefit. You can go to Juminhyo, you can go to convenience store to get Juminhyo and other things if you have a My Number card, which is very, very convenient. If you go, you get, and you need Juminhyo so many times a year. But how many people need Juminhyo a year? They need like 2 or 3 a year. If it's 2 or 3, there's no incentive that, okay, I can get it at convenience store. So what's the big deal? So, but I talked to some of the mayors in the local cities, and we are having a little bit of discussion as to how to promote my number card. Okay, sorry. Then I think what he said was that because it's a local city, everybody drives. So if my number card can be used as a driver's license, that will spread very, very quickly. And I think we are in the process, but it's going to take a little while because we have to deal with the other ministry. Is that correct?
Well, if you're working in Kasumigaseki, in bureaucracy in Japan, until quite recently, you're not allowed to use Zoom. You're not allowed to use the Google Calendar. You're not allowed to use Google Form. So the bureaucrats in Japan tend to use paper, and they are not really digital savvy people. So they don't know the technology. If you don't use it, it's very difficult to tell others how convenient this technology is. So I think the first step is we need to transform Kasumigaseki into whole digital thing. You know, I was trying to get rid of facsimile in Kasumigaseki, and there was quite strong opposition. Facsimile is safer than email, or everyone uses facsimile. It's probably because Kasumigaseki uses facsimile, everyone else has to use it. So if we can transform Kasumigaseki in digital way, I think it'll be a lot easier to let people know how important or how convenient to go on digital. So the government, digitalization in the government, digital transformation in the government is the key, I think.
That's it. Good. I think it's a great idea. How do we do it? It's a different story. Rikke, you had some comments.
I did, because we have exactly the same challenge in Denmark. And what we did in Denmark was, as my number card in Denmark is our EID, and we actually made the EID together with the banks. So when it was rolled out, it also gave access to your bank account. And as a citizen, you access your bank account maybe twice a week, but you don't access public sector very often. But actually, because we had the banks with us, the citizens got to use the EID. They saw the value of the EID, and there's also something about you have to learn to use it. So in the beginning, if you can only use it for 2 or 3 services and maybe use it once a month, you keep forgetting how to use it. So there should be something with value in it. So I think that the driver in Denmark for the public sector was that we actually made it together with the private sector, with the bank and the financial sector. That was one of the drivers. So I agree with the point.
I see. Thank you very much. I think we're running out of time, and I would like to ask each panelist to give us specific actions that you plan to take with all these things. You want to start, Henrik?
Sure. Okay. So I think one of the really important takeaways from all of this, we keep coming back to the question of trust, for example, is to really take a look at what are we building today? Like, what are the systems that we are constructing today? Who are they for? And what is the technology that we employ, and so on? There are extremely exciting new technologies out there that can solve many of these problems in very exciting ways that I think sometimes we are a little bit too slow to adopt. Obviously thinking of things that are dear to me, close to me, things like blockchain and so on. But I think what we need to do also is, from the private sector, we need to work very closely with our friends in government, for example, to educate about these technologies and raise the level of understanding. And also, from our point of view, sort of explain what the value is and so on. I think if we can meet and have those types of conversations, there are enormous opportunities for new developments here, both in terms of building services for, not necessarily for how things are working exactly today, but how we think they will develop in the next 50 years and so on. But also, in a way, making and building services that we know bring immediate value to the citizens and the people who will actually use these services at some point. So I think a stronger dialogue between private and public sector, and leaning into some of these technologies, which are extremely powerful and very, very interesting. That sort of forward-looking mentality is essential for us to be able to include everyone, really, both in terms of generations, but also in terms of thinking, outside of just, for example, national borders, or even just city borders within the nation. So that mindset and that dialogue is something that we need to drive much harder. And I hope that, as a representative of the private sector here, that we can open up these types of dialogues and push this forward together.
Okay, great. Rikke?
Yes, I think that one of my key points is that the cooperation is very important, as Henrik also is addressing, that both private and public sector has to work together here. You need the government and the politicians, the parliament, to get involved in discussions as well. And I also believe that there's some discussion needed before you start to introduce your solutions. But you have to do it combined in cooperation with as many parties as ever possible, participating in the dialogue and conversation, and not both to maintain and build the trust.
Great. Kono-san.
Yes, I think the turning point in Japan is we are soon terminating the telephone service for the old style cell phones. So everyone would have to move out of so-called garake to smartphone.
I see.
And then I think we need to probably create some kind of community center where senior people could go there with their new smartphone, learn how to use it. And then we can start including those senior people into smartphone system. And we are now moving my number onto the smartphone, so then they can access to their government service with their smartphone. So I think that'll be the turning point, and we need to be ready to have infrastructure for that.
So that will be a very good turning point for all of us, and that may trigger a big transformation, big change in many ways. And I think we need something like that. And as long as we talk about all these things, but we need some triggering point. And once we get that out of the way, and people get used to using it themselves, I think that will change very clearly. So I think right now I would like to ask our ambassador from Sweden to give us a closing remarks based upon the discussion that we have had.
Thanks, Yoko. And what a cool talk this was. Peter, you started to say what a cool place this is. And I think it became a very cool talk. Thank you for that. And thanks for all of you who are participating online. And some guests here, we all look forward to the light of the tunnel when the pandemic is over and we can gather 500 people here and talk together at the same time. I really liked this talk. I will not try to summarize it. I liked it personally when it almost became a bit philosophical there for a while. What is trust and what is freedom? I've been in the country for 2.5 years here in Japan now, and I think a lot about this uchi and soto. How come that we in the Nordic countries is very often it's me, what I want, and here it's very often we, it's a group. I think we can learn from each other here. And in many Nordic people's perspective, Japan is probably one of the safest and the most harmonious places to be. So you said in the beginning that many Japanese people have Nordic and the Nordic countries close at heart, the Hokus, while many Nordic people really have Japan close at heart. Value. I think it's so correct when it's about the value of digitalization. And you're onto it, but the thing that I missed perhaps in this discussion is time. And the pandemic has really shown us, I think, suddenly it has given us so much time. We don't need to sit on the commuter train half the day. We don't have to wait for the modem to start in 25 minutes. And the access. I have been visiting museums all over the world during this in my quarantine. Suddenly I can travel without really traveling. So this is value. It's time, it's access, and I think smart nations could also use this. Japan, that is really trying to get more tourists to come back, imagine if the digitalization of Japan also showed that you were the coolest country on the planet that you can visit in real time and we can go to all these places. There is an opportunity to go a bit first. We didn't talk so much about the dangers, but it came up, and I think it's important to also be honest about the dangers of digitalization. And there could be some dangers, and bubbles and opinion corridors is actually something that worries me and worries democracies on the planet. This reading newspapers, why do I only get the information that I think I like? We need to think about this. The Nordic countries here in Japan, we want to be a part of this. We have much to learn ourselves in our part of the world, but I think the Japanese and the Nordics are close. So let us in, for you who work on digitalization at the agency and for government and for politics. Let's talk about it, because it needs to also come from below. I want to finish with that. We talked about where it comes from. In our part of the world, for historic reasons, very often it's not been the governments that have been telling us what to do. It's been strong civil society movements that have been screaming and shouting and complaining, and the governments have been listening. Digitalization can also be a tool of listening. Listening, responding, communicating. The beauty of the Nordic talks here is really that we want to communicate with Japan. The Hokko countries want to communicate with Japan. So please join us when we will have the next Nordic talks in the end of March on gender equality. Also very important for us in the Nordic countries, but also tremendously important here in Japan. Thanks to the guests, thanks to the speakers, and thanks to the Creative University. Goodbye to all of you there on the screen. See you soon again. And remember, you always want to talk to the Nordics. So go on to the Nordic talks. Thank you. Arigato. Bye-bye.
Bye.